Hey everyone, welcome to the June meeting for the OCA. We welcome everyone who's online watching. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, we're glad you could join us. This is kind of a new thing we're doing with the pandemic, being able to be here. My name is Byron. I'm the newest member to the board, and we've got Lou Carbone down below. He's the president of the OCA, and Mo Delvin. He's going to be giving us some tips and tricks on how to edit photos in Photoshop here tonight. So we got a great show planned for you guys. Hopefully you guys engage and talk with us in the chat. We'd love for you to ask questions. And Lou here is going to kind of introduce what's happening with Extravaganza, what the plans are for this fall, and for us to know what to expect and when we can start registering. So Lou, take it away and let us know what's going on.
Thank you, Byron, and thank you for hosting this. And thank you, Don, if you're listening, for helping to arrange all this. We appreciate it. I wish I could see you because my tendency is to say, nice to see y'all, but I can't see you. So nice. Hope somebody's listening. There we go. There's a bunch of names there. Okay, very good. Thank you. We will be opening Extravaganza. Well, actually, it's open right now. If you wanted to register, you could. It's all some finishing touches on there today. A couple of points. There's been no price increases except for a couple of pieces of merchandise that we expect our prices to go up from talking to the vendors. And so everything's going to be the same. T-shirt design, again, by Sam Scales Garcia. But I don't know if it'll be available right away. I like to be able to put the T-shirt design or at least part of it up. But he has a few problems that he can't work around at the moment. So the design will be coming along soon. Speaking of the T-shirts, you do have to know that the T-shirt deadline is October 31st. After that, you can't get a T-shirt. You can't get any of the packages that get T-shirts simply because we have to put in the order sooner or later. So that you got to keep that in mind. For the hotel, same price, $74 a night. The link will be on the Facebook announcement that will take you, that will automatically have the code in there for our event. Something that we forgot to announce last year that caused a problem. The hotel room has to be booked by October 26th. At that point, they're going to shut it down because they want to, be able to use the rooms for other people. So October 26th will be the deadline for booking the room at our price. The speakers. So who's the speakers going to be? As usual, we have Odd Konings here. This time we'll be talking about cichlids from the central Tanzanian shore. His colleague, Larry Johnson, will be giving a talk on Malawi, not Malawi cichlids in general. It's about his activities. He took over a lot of the activities that I used to do. The Stuart Grant Fund activities on site there, and he's been, putting new fish back in that they've been trying to repopulate some of the reefs and stuff like that. I don't have a title for him, but it's going to be based on his recent trip out there. To talk about New World cichlids, we have Jeff Cardwell. Again, it would be about a recent trip to Colombia and some of his experiences there and the fish that he's collecting. We have a catfish talk from Eric Bodrock, I've known Eric since the early days of Extravaganza when both of us were skinny and both of us had hair. So just thinking back, I remember what he looked like. I don't know. He's going to be spawning oddball catfish will be his talk, and he's spawned. He's done tons of different kinds of cats. So he's done more cats than when I probably even know existed. So Eric will be giving that talk. Now we have introducing to the American hobby a young man from Denmark. His name is Håkan Haagensen. Håkan is catfish specialist, but he does some New World cichlids too. And to help balance out our programs, he's doing one of each. One of them is a new Laura Caraday imports. So a lot of the new stuff that's coming into the hobby, he'll be telling us about and showing us lots of photos. And he's going to talk about pistos. So how to keep and breed a pistogramma will be his other talk, his second talk. The Friday night talk is going to be Eric again, and this time with Regina Spotty. Their title is Living with a Fish Geek. So there's two very serious fish people in their household. And, it's hard enough with one. But when you got...
I was going to say, I would think all our wives could give that talk for us.
Right. Except that she's really into it. She's
okay.
on her own. This isn't a fish room widow type situation. So that'll be Friday night. And so those are our speakers for this year. I'm hoping some of the talks are based on recent trips, so I'm hoping they can take these trips. With some of the travel restrictions. So I'm sure they'll be able to come up with something if they can't. So we get to back into the normal. Another one of our activities at our meetings is talk about upcoming programs, and these are all very. Oh, by the way, who knows if we can have an extravaganza, right? Just to be honest, we don't know what the situation's going to be. We're planning for it as if it was all going to be normal. If you're hesitant to sign up for it because of that, you don't need to be, because we're going to refund any money. So any money that you pay will be refunded totally. If we have to, if you pay by PayPal, that's extremely easy for our treasurer and everybody else. So that would be the best way to go, especially under the circumstances. So we don't have meetings scheduled for November. It's November, July, but August, if we can have our meeting. I know the Middleburg Rec is loosening up some, but they're not allowing groups in their community rooms yet. So we can't have a meeting as if we wanted to have a meeting in July, probably we couldn't do it, but maybe August. So we have Rich Bierbauer, those beautiful koi angels that you see at some of our auctions. He'll be talking about breeding and raising quality angelfish. That's August 7th. September 4th is Michael Liu from the New England Cichlid Association. They bring in all those really cool wild fish collected from Africa, and he's going to be talking about a bunch of those. And his talk is rare and unusual American cichlids. So hopefully we can have those guys speak. If not, we'll schedule them later. Just got to roll with how it's going and make the best of it. Okay. All right. So about ready to get to tonight's program. This gentleman is, we've been seeing his fish photos online for years and just gawking at him and wondering how he gets such wonderful captures of his fish. And we're going to learn some tonight about how he does the editing and making the photos the best they can be. So here is Mo Devlin.
It's the same way you get to Carnegie Hall, Lou. Practice, buddy. That's all it takes is a lot of practice. That's all. I appreciate it.
Practice enough, I'll get to Carnegie Hall. Very good.
I appreciate the invite, and this is a presentation I wanted to do a long time ago. I was telling Don, Danko just texted me. I said it's like watching paint dry, watching somebody edit photographs. But there's a lot of different things you can pick up in editing techniques if you just watch. And it's going to be a very short PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to go into some editing. So right off the bat, let me share my screen here. Share screen. Entire screen. All right. Allow. So I think we're good now.
All right.
Can everybody see that?
Here we go.
All right. So the first thing is I'm going to tell you is this. I get people having conversations about the photographs that I take, and they're wondering, are they juiced? Is it something that you're coloring or painting or enhancing? The answer to all that stuff is yes, it is. I mean, I am producing a photograph. And my goal is primarily to create the very best possible photograph with the image that I'm using. And I shoot primarily, 100% actually, in raw images. That it's a little different than if you shoot in JPEG. And I think I probably had this conversation with a lot of people in the past. One of the reasons I don't use JPEG a lot, I don't know if you know this or not, but it's a lossy file, which means that every time you open and close it, you actually lose some of the quality of the photograph. So I like shooting in RAW, and RAW is basically a JPEG is a photograph where the camera takes all of the settings and then it decides what the JPEG is going to be looking like, and it gives it to you, and it gives you some limited capability of actually editing the JPEG. A RAW image allows you to take all the raw data. It basically, a RAW is exactly what it sounds like. It records all of the data that the current situation is, and lets you go back after the fact and do the actual processing in Photoshop. So today's demo, I'm going to show you some basic raw editing and raw editing workflow. Just using some of the tools, because there are a lot of different options to use in a ACR, Adobe Camera Raw editing. Some editing tips in Photoshop. I have some third-party filters that I'll show you how to use, and they're wonderful. There it is, third-party plugins. And achieving the blackout look. And everybody knows the blackout look is you'll see a photograph and it'll be the fish and it'll be in the middle of suspended in, in a blackout look. That makes sense. So I ask what your workflow is. The first thing, and this is kind of unusual to start a conversation like this, but monitor color calibration. I actually, for many years, I was actually processing and editing photographs, and I'd have people say to me, they look a little green. So I went out and bought a monitor calibrator called, and for the life of me, I can't think of what it is right now, but it actually made my colors exactly the way they should be. So when I see a red on the screen, it's actually a red that I'm actually processing. So it's not an expensive proposition. You can buy one for 50, 60 bucks. The other thing is I sift through my images in Bridge and Lightroom. You'll see that in a second. I open them in Adobe Camera Raw, and then I finish editing in Photoshop. So with that in mind, let me see get to the.
What version of Photoshop are you using, by the way, Mo?
I use Photoshop Creative Cloud, so it always updates. It updates on a regular basis, and I think.
Is there a second version of that when you use Creative Cloud that's like kind of more of a novice version?
Photoshop Elements, I think, is the other one you're looking at. But
okay.
Creative Cloud it's a $10 a month $10 a month subscription, which in the big scheme of things, $10 is not that a big deal.
Oh yeah.
So this is the files I'm working with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up several files here. I'm going to open up the Bredori, and I'll tell you why the Bredori in a second. One of the conversations I had with somebody was about specifically juicing this file. That's the JPEG. Hang on. Here it is here. One sec. And there it is. Now I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna change this back to the actual camera default settings over here. That's what the picture looks like. So one of the first things I do when I go in here is I go over and there's a small block over here called Profiles, and it gives you Adobe Profiles where it actually gives you a level of changing color and contrast and clarity. If you're shooting with a regular camera, your camera will sometimes give you an option of shooting in standard format, which is it means basically everything's kind of flat. There's nothing really popping out of the photograph. Then there's like a vivid, which basically gives you enhanced colors and everything else. I always start with an Adobe standard because I don't want the camera making any decisions on the final product, even though I can change it in Camera Raw here. So I'm going to pick the Adobe color here. Now, once I've done that, I go over and one of the first things I do is there's a button over here called Auto, and I click Auto, and watch what happens to the photograph. What Auto does is it takes an average reading here by this histogram, and it enlightens everything. So if I go back to the original, everything is dark back here, and I got the fish, and it's gonna basically brighten up everything, right? So I don't want to brighten up everything. I only want to brighten up this guy right here. I don't mind, especially with all this spots. What the spots are is basically stuff, just bubbles and crap in the water that's illuminated because all of my lighting comes from above. So it basically illuminates all. So I don't want any of that. So I'm going to go backward. And I'm going to start by taking down here on the color slider and the exposure and expose it a little bit. I'm watching my histogram up here. Anything over to the left is shadows. That's this area over here. I'll show you again. Watch. See how it went down? And everything over here is highlights. So I'm really low on the highlights. If you hold down the Alt button on your computer and go down to the sliders down here, white and black, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the white pixel. And the white pixel basically is the default section for what white should be. When I start to slide it, you can see it goes black, and you can see the very up around this area here, you can see it start to come in. I want it about like that. Same thing with the black. The black will start to come in. Now, I don't care if that black in the background, when you start seeing this over here, anything that actually you can see right now is going to have a loss of detail, meaning you're not going to be able to get anything focused in the background. And again, for a background, I'm not really worried about that. I'm worried about the fish. The next thing I do is I go down here and I hit the clarity. Now the clarity, all the clarity does is basically makes it a little sharper, and you'll see it start to brighten up a little bit. All right. Next one over here is the levels, and I check my levels a little bit, and you'll see the histogram up here make a change. I want to move that away a little bit, and I want to drop the shadows down a little bit. Now, all of these buttons up here have different purposes, obviously. This button is very valuable. This is a white balance button. So I'm looking at this picture now, and I want to have the correct colors. I try to find something on the screen that is white, gray, or black. In this case, it's going to be a small pebble down here in the right corner. Watch what happens to the fish. All of a sudden, he's more purple. All right. If you want to, you can take an average by using the eyedropper and grabbing a bigger portion of that, like a square, and it may change it again. But again, I'm watching the fish, and I know by looking at this that this is incorrect. So I'm just going to go back to the original picture. Going over here to the levels, I'm going to drop my level a little bit. Go to the sharpen button. Now the sharpen button, basically, I want to look at the sharp. Whenever I want to sharpen an image, I go in and put it at 100%, and then watch the image. This is the amount of the sharpening. This is how many pixels are actually affected, and the detail button basically enhances a little bit. You'll see it. Watch again. Now, if at any time you want to watch and see how it looks against the original picture, you can go down here and click one of these buttons, and it'll show you basically before and after picture. You see that. All right. Shortcut key, Control-0, makes it out to the screen. There's the image now. All right. You can see that. Okay. Now, over here, this is the saturation button. Now, I generally don't hit this very much, but I go over back to my original screen, and down here on the bottom, there's a button called Vibrance. What Vibrance does is Vibrance actually picks up saturation, hits the whole picture. You can see that everything gets saturated. I don't really usually touch that. I go over here to the Vibrance. What Vibrance does is it actually picks up some of the colors that are not as dramatic. And you'll see that increase a little bit as I'm doing it. A little bit down here. This next button here is the affects all of the colors. Now the colors are okay. I don't want to enhance that too much, but I do see I have predominantly orange and purple here. So I'm going to try on my saturation and boost just a little bit of those pictures, those colors. All right. This next button over here is for enabling the profile correction. In other words, the lens that I shot this with was a 105mm Nikon. When I click this, it gives you the actual, and sometimes it affects it, sometimes it doesn't. It does a lot of has a lot more effect on it when it is a wide angle lens. You'll see that. But all these lenses, these lenses are listed here, and you can pick them. But I use the automatic feature, and removing chromatic aberration. I don't know if there's any chromatic aberration on here. Let's see, what am I doing here?
Mo, do you have templates you use to like save you time?
Oh shit. Templates?
Templates. Like
Templates, not
basically,
really. Well, yeah, I mean, in some respects I do. I mean, in some respects I have, I save, and I'll show you in a sec. I can go over here. Once I have all the settings, I can go over here and actually save the settings. So then as I open up additional photographs, like when I take a picture of this fish, I don't take one photograph, I take 30.
Yeah.
So if I save the settings on this, I can save my workflow and just save these settings and apply them to everything else that comes up.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, I didn't know if you had like favorite templates you use or different things like that, where you take different, because I mean, that's a lot of time to come up with a setting you like and do that for each picture you take.
Yeah, you can see over here, all these are presets that I've done over the past, and some of them are, most of them I use like numbers because I'm editing all kinds of photographs. But if I have, like, for example, shrimp, here's citronellum. These are all done around the colors I have for citronellum. I have Trimac down here and some others. And I'll save that. I always save the settings. And what happens is when I open this photograph and then open another photograph, I can actually use the previous editing settings. So that makes it easy as well. So once I have that done, I'm going to go up here again and take a look. This is a cloning brush where I can either heal or clone. And for something like that, like for example, if I wanted to get rid of this small here, it just basically clones the picture. That's healing, rather, and then cloning would be different. Cloning uses the area closest to that. This is kind of a tool that I use all the time. It's a paintbrush. Now, there's a couple ways I can change the color and adjust some of the settings on here in addition. This is called a, where's it at? Spot. Here it is, target adjustment. As I hold this over top of the fish, like I see this, the highlighted area here, and I want to change the luminance of that. All I do is put this, and I can darken it. So I can go through and adjust these things. And I can do that for the saturation if I want to. And you can see some of the pictures of the colors changing. But the paintbrush is more of a larger tool. It isn't. It's more of a bigger stamp. And a lot of times, what I'll do is, as I'm looking at the fish is nice. This photograph was taken, by the way, back when I was doing basically one or two lights above. Since that point in time, I'm doing lights above and beyond. So it's somewhat lit in the bottom, but not bad. Here's where the light fell off, and I really want these the fins to show up. So I get my paintbrush, and it opens up this other sub menu, and the sub menu has all these options you can do. Make it real simple. I want to increase the exposure a little bit, and I'll go in here, and this is feathering. This means it's not a hard line. This is a little bit of a softer line, and I'll paint this in. And I don't know, Byron, can you see that? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing what you're doing there, how it's enhancing it where you're going over the top of it. You can
lighten it up to where you want it. And I generally bump up the clarity, which increases the sharpness a little bit. Sometimes saturation. And then each time I do that, I go back here and I start anew. In other words, that is one layer adjustment. I can show you. This is what I'm adjusting here. That's exactly that's the area that I'm affecting. So I can, the nice thing about editing with RAW is that it gives you a non-destructive workflow. In other words, I can go back a year from now and open up the same file and re-edit it in an entirely different way if I wanted to. So I don't really, if that's the right exposure for this fin over here, and as I'm looking at it, right here is actually a little too much. So I can go back here to erase and erase this portion off, and it's a little better. I create a new one, and I go up here and make this fin the same way. That's a little too much. And you can paint.
So I found when I take pictures of my fish,
yeah,
they don't always look the same in the picture as what they do in life. So my question is, which is closer to what the fish actually looks like when you're done editing it or before you edit it?
The key word there is look. I mean, if you're looking at it and it's under bright light, you're seeing what the camera's seeing. But if it's under normal lighting conditions in your tank, it's going to look entirely different. Mm-hmm. You know, all I'm doing is taking the data that's there. In other words, the camera recorded these colors. I'm bringing them out so they're actually more vivid. That's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, lighting makes a huge difference.
Huge difference, big difference. And again, you can see with this paintbrush, you can go a couple of different ways. Right up top, the top of the fish here is very, very bright. So I'm going to go back and hit a new button, hit that, and I'm going to bring the exposure down, bring my highlights down, and then when I paint on top of the fish here, I can darken that up a little bit. Again, the goal is to produce the best possible photograph, and I can micromanage this and say, well, I'd like a little more light in the belly, so I'm going to go down here and add a little bit of light in the belly, and that's it. There's some other tools up here. If I wanted to darken this, I could do this, but with the paintbrush as well. I can get a paintbrush, darken it a little bit over here, and go up here and just darken this a little bit to make the fish stand out, darken the bottom. Or I can take this gradient brush and take the gradient and write that down, and that'll do the same thing. All right. So once I have that, I open the image up, and there's my image. Nope. Where'd it go? There's the image. All right. So the picture I want is that. A couple different ways you can achieve that. One of them is through a third-party app called Topaz Remask. Now, Topaz has a whole list of a suite of filters that you can use. Here's the actual Topaz filters. Clarity, clean actually cleans up some of the noise. In Focus does some strange things. And I don't use a lot of these things. I use one or two all the time. I use the Clarity, and I use the AI, the Clear AI, and I'll show you that in a second. But one of the ways you can achieve a blackout look is by taking and opening up. Well, let me show you the easier way first. Easier way first is, and I always, whenever I'm editing a photograph, before I touch anything over here, I duplicate my layer. These are the layers over here. So basically, these are just two layers. I turn them on, turn them off. I'm going to work with the layer here. I'm never going to touch my original file down here. I always, it's just something I've set myself in doing. And what I want to do is I want to get rid of some of the noise back here in the background. So I'm going to take this picture, and I'm going to take and duplicate it one more time. Go back and select that bottom photograph. Go up here to Filter, Noise, Dust and Scratches. And what that does is you can see that it actually drops out some of the noise and scratches up here. The radius tells you how much of it's going to adjust. The threshold tells you how sensitive it is. The lower the number down here, the bigger the effect. All right. So now I'm going to say that's okay. Now once I have that, I'm going to turn my top layer back on, and you can see I still have my picture, my marks and everything. All right. Down here is something called a layer mask. A layer mask is interesting, is that it basically allows me to uncover some of the top layer to expose some of the bottom layer. So what I do is I get my paintbrush again, hang on, delete, take my paintbrush again, and black will erase the top layer, white will add it back. So I'm going to select the black brush. I'm going to select my layer mask, select the black brush, make it big enough. This is the hardness. This is a hard layer. This means it'll actually feather. So I'm going to go hard for right now. And as I wipe this clean, you can see what happens. The dust goes away. Like I said, it's like watching paint dry and watching me do this, right? Let's say I make a mistake. I go across the fish. All I need to do is reselect this, change this to a white brush, and I can go back here and repair it. And that's one way I can get that cleaned up using a paintbrush. All right, that's one way. So now I'm going to put these away for a second. All right, go back to my original photograph. Another filter that I would use is called AI Clear. Now, this is the filter I'm going to duplicate. I'm not going to touch that bottom one. I'm going to go to Adobe Studio, which is basically all of the Topaz filters, rather, Topaz Studio, all the Topaz filters under one roof. And this is a filter that I use probably 90% of the time on 90% of my photographs. And you'll see why in a second. It's called AI Clear. AI Clear, and it's going to bring up a real close-up of this picture over here. And watch what happens to the picture. What AI Clear does is it actually sharpens the picture a little bit and removes some of the noise. There's one more filter in here called Precision Contrast, and that just sharpens up some of the small, and I'll show you can really hit it hard, but a little bit of the sharpening here. Here's a medium. And there's my picture, 0, and I'm going to open that back up. Now, next step up is the Topaz Remask. And Topaz Remask, I select that, and what's going to do is going to bring up a third-party program that looks like that. If you've ever tried to knock out a background just by cutting the picture out with a magic lasso or whatever it is, and they've gotten a lot better. In fact, the quick selection tool is pretty good on the newer Photoshops. But with this, all you need to do is select the area that you want to highlight. And I'm going to go real quick here. And the goal here is to actually take and get half of what you want. In other words, when I zoom in, I want to put that little arrow, that little plus in the center on top of it, and go all around the fish. And in order to speed the workflow up, if you hold the Shift key down, you can actually make straight lines. So you'll see that in a second here. Shift, Shift, Shift. I can go all around this fish. Doesn't have to be clean. Whenever you have like fins sticking out, get the whole fin like down here. You want to get on both sides. Up here, down here. All around the fish. Making sure that that is covering. That's kind of a sloppy job. Normally I'll take my time, and you can make a smaller brush. What I've found is that the smaller brush, even though it's a tiny, tiny pinpoint, when you get in close to do that, you can actually get a smaller area. And it's just narrowing down, telling the computer to be a little more accurate. But I'm not going to do that right now. So once I have the fish outlined, it has to be completely outlined. I go down here to the fill. I click fill. It fills the bucket. I go down to the areas that I've little pockets like here and hit compute mask. I'm going to put what I'm going to keep over here, and I'm going to put on a color background so I can actually look at it. You can see the mask over here on the bottom. You can see how some of the images are bleeding through, are bleeding through, I can increase the mask intensity down here. And all these little areas that you see the dots, that is where the computer's confused and doesn't know that it shouldn't be there. And all you need to do is go into this little gizmo up here, which selects the erase button. And I'm saying, I want you to select that pixel and get rid of those pixels, that spill, the slop right there. And I'm going to do this quickly because I want to move on to some other stuff. And you can clean all that up. And you can go back and look at the original if you want to say, okay, there's the leaf, that's what's going on. All right. So once that's as clean as I want, and I'll, you can spend a lot of time here cleaning. Oh, Christ, wouldn't you know that? Okay, close program. It's a good thing I did that. All right, so there it is. Here's the fish. Here's the Bredori, and here is what it looks like when it comes out of the hopper like that. And all I need to do now is what I do is I make a black background by creating a backdrop. Go over here to the paint bucket, select that, make it a black background, drag the fish on top, and there it is with the black background. That's pretty easily done. A big portion of that is done when you're taking the photograph. I mean, if you shoot it correctly, the background should be somewhat dark to begin with. But this is just some little tools, and I use this a lot when I'm putting together ads for clients for fish-related ads or whatever. All right, moving on. Here's an example of the picture I took of a Haitiensis, and again, the same issue goes here. Now, if I wanted it, this was not a Haitiensis. In fact, let me show you. Let me do this. Let me just select another picture of a Bredori if I have it here. Yes, I do. Where is it at? Here it is. One here, one here. Hit open. It opens up the two files. As you can see, it's about where the other picture was. I hit here, select all, and I go to previous conversion. And I got a big jump on getting that thing edited. And if I had 50 photographs, I do it the same way and then go down here and just basically tweak as needed for all these photographs. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of that and go back to, let's see, the Haitiensis. Haitiensis gives me a couple of advantages because I do know for a fact that this is white-ish. So I'll use that as the where to get my color balance. I've used my color balance tool here. And if it's white and black and I wanted to get a bigger sampling of that, I just do a little square, and that's probably closer to what it should be. My rapid adjustment, luminance, drop the luminance a little bit, and then go on to my other editing over through here. Once that's opened up, and again, this is I'll show you a different way of getting a blackout. Again, duplicating my layer. And then they have a selection of tools. One of them is called a quick selection tool. If I can find out where it's at now. Quick selection tool. And all you need to do is just drag it across the fish. It's a little more time consuming and not as accurate. If you grab too much, you can go up here and select the minus key and take some of it away if you wanted to. But I'm going to select the whole fish. I hit Control C, which copies a layer. Control C, Control V, paste the layer. So now I have the layer of the fish here. Duplicate the background. I'm sorry, create another layer in the background. And again, drop some black paint on that. Bring the fish on top of it. And again, I missed some of it, but you get the general point. This is a picture of a Melanurus. I'm going to go with the default picture here. Custom set. I'm sorry. Default settings. This is the way it looks. This one, what I would do is I would actually hit auto to give me an idea where the fish should be, and then back it down so the background, the color drops down. Byron, if I sound like I'm babbling, buddy, let me know. This is the first time I've done this and actually.
No, you're good. I've been just kind of chatting with people online to see what they're thinking and what their thoughts are. And, you know, for some of them, they're going, wow, this is like art. You know, you'll be able to see how this is all done, that there's a lot more work into it than just taking a picture.
Yeah, it depends really on what your goal is too. I mean, if you're taking pictures of your fish, have fun, take pictures of your fish. I mean, I'm doing it for entirely my own purposes, you know, my own purposes, which it's just been something I'm doing a long time. But it's worth learning some of these new programs that are out there, just to even enhance what you're already doing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like people are just kind of wondering about, I think a lot of people didn't realize that Photoshop is actually a subscription now. You know,
Yeah.
It's no longer this $300 purchase, but it's a $10 a month deal. And you get a whole lot more updates now and presets and all that stuff that you just didn't get before, because it's
exactly right.
Way update.
No, I mean, you can even edit your JPEGs in Photoshop. You don't even have to shoot RAW if you don't want to. But it's a little bit of an advantage, I think, to have that raw file with all the data. This picture that you're looking at right now was taken literally, I think it was 10 or 11 years ago. I just happened to find an old file full of all these old photographs of fish that I haven't seen in a while. I haven't had Melanurus in a long time, and use them for editing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to see if I can show you a chromatic aberration, what that looks like.
So I have a problem when I take photos of my fish because sometimes I have too much tintic blue lighting going on, and it makes like kind of a whitish blue reflective look on some of my fish. Not all of them. It all has to do with the coloring of the fish.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I mean, a photograph is basically light reflecting off of the subject. You know, so if in fact this fish is up against an orange pot, and you use a flash, the fish is going to look a little orange. You know, and there are actually ways of adjusting that in Photoshop. One of them is called highlighting. You can actually change the tint of the picture. So
I do have someone online is asking what model of Nikon camera are you currently using?
I have several Nikon cameras. The one that I generally go to is I have a Nikon D850 that I use, and I tell people that, and then I mean this in all sincerity. I mean, it's great to have a camera that has a processor like a D850. It's a great camera, excellent camera, but really it comes down to the light. I mean, if I had to give you some advice on a direction to go, get yourself a medium format camera. I mean, a camera that you're comfortable with, and invest in a good speed light. I mean, you're serious about doing this, you need to have a flash on the thing. And that's really the big difference. That's really the big difference in my photographs and other photographs you see online, the amount of light that's thrown. I mean, I'm to a point now where I may throw as many as 5 or 6 different speed lights on a tank that's, 75 or 100 gallon tank. That's a lot of light.
And did you mention what kind of lens you're using?
My go-to lens is a 105 macro lens, 105 lens, millimeter lens. And the reason I do that is because I don't like to get up depth. If you understand depth of field is the amount of that's in focus. Now, this picture you're looking at now, the depth of field is very shallow, okay? Because in the background's out of focus, and this fish happened to be facing the camera flat on, okay? So my depth of field is good. If I use a 105 millimeter lens, my depth of field is automatically going to be greater because I'm stepping farther away from the tank to shoot the fish. The closer you get to the tank with a normal lens and using a lower aperture, like an f4, the lower the number, the less the depth of field, it actually shortens it even more. So it gives me an advantage of stepping back from the tank a little bit and being able to get that deeper depth of field automatically. In addition to that, I found that just being a little farther away from the tank puts the fish at ease.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the chromatic aberration I was talking about. It's difficult to see, and I use this all the time when you're adjusting. You see the top of the fish, how it has that little cast. If I do the automatic chromatic aberration, watch what happens. I don't know if you can see this or not. See how it went? Actually, the color went away. That's what happens when you get that edge around an image. Okay.
So we got about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Actually, I think Don has a question here.
Go.
Let me see what he says here. He's commenting. He's just saying that basically DSLR cameras in general, with a good flash, you can take some nice pictures.
That's it. That's really what it comes down to. Here's another image that I had and used it two different ways. This is one done with the Topaz Remask. This is the original photograph. This is dropping basically the image in black. This is the same thing with the mask, where I actually have the photograph. I'm going to disable the mask. And you can see that, and then just by adding the mask back, you can make it look black. I don't really have, I mean, I could go on and just show you, it can be pretty repetitive, but the bottom line is that, you know, once you have your one image, in other words, I can open up all these images at one time. And from a workflow perspective, I can select them all, and I can edit all of the images at the same time. In other words, if I increase them all, they all increase.
Got a question here online. They're asking, do you have a favorite cichlid picture you've taken?
I do. It's a photograph of a maniguins with a cloud of fry around it. It was actually featured in National Geographic at one point. And that's actually one of my favorite photographs that I've taken. All these pictures are good.
Is that the one that we have on our Facebook group?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay, how do I get back here to my screen? Stop sharing screen. Yeah. Again, like watching paint dry. I'd be more than happy to answer whatever questions you.
He also, there's another question here. It says, do you have, do you use a macro lens?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I use it's a 105 macro, a Nikkor 105 micro lens. You know, I actually use all the lenses. I've actually used the a fisheye lens just to get different effects. I mean, to me, it's all about the exploration. It's all about, you know, thinking, you know, what happens if I do this when I take the photograph. And I'm always experimenting and trying to do something different. The goal for me in the very beginning, when I was taking fish photographs, was I was just photographing fish. And I was a photographer photographing fish. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm a photographer. Let's take photographs of fish. Let's take something that really looks like it's, you know. So I tried to make it a little more artistic. And that was just that just kickstarted all the exploration of lighting and different techniques and everything. I mean, right down to a point, Byron, where I spend a lot of time in front of the tanks, kind of like programming my fish to respond to my hand movements, right? I mean, I go down, I call it eyeball time. Especially all of my my larger fish, I go down and literally will spend, you know, 5 or 10 minutes with my eyeballs close to the tank just so they can maintain and see me. When I turn, they turn. So now if I'm taking a photograph and I want the fish to turn, I put my hand up here and the fish turns there, which is kind of cool.
Got another question here. Put on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. Is there a difference in the way you do photos of frozen flowers versus fish?
With the exception of the ice, no. It's all about light, and I have a lot of light. I surround all my images with light, Scott. All the images are surrounded with light, and that makes a huge difference. I encourage you all, if in fact you are serious about you know, bumping up your fish photographs, take a look at that Topaz suite of filters. The AI Clear is a must-have. That's really good because it does it eliminates one of the major problems people have, especially if you're shooting without a flash, because you'll get that noise from a low light situation, and that AI Clear will help clear that up and sharpen up your photographs. That's a must-have. And beyond that, you you know, if you're not using Photoshop or a photo editing program, I like Photoshop. I mean, I'm probably on Photoshop 3-4 hours a day doing things. If you're not on it, it's worth a try. Photoshop Elements is good, but Photoshop for $10 a month, you know, treat yourself.
That sounds great. That's yeah, my wife does family portraits, and that's what she uses is the CCC Studio. And I'm nowhere near that kind of photographer. I use my iPhone yet, but you know,
on the iPhone, man. We're just having a conversation before we started. The iPhone 11 is probably one of the best cameras I've ever seen on a phone. I've taken some really killer photographs with that, you know, of fish just with, you know, with the iPhone.
Yeah. And so that's cool that you can even do that type of editing with, you know, as simple as your camera phone. And I mean, definitely you get a lot better picture when you use a DSLR. But you know, for those who aren't yet ready to invest in a camera like that, you know, you have that there. So that's good stuff.
Well, again, like I said, jokingly, it's like watching paint dry, watching people editing photographs. I mean, to me personally, I like the editing part of it as much as I do taking the photograph. It really gives me an opportunity to put a little more artistic license in making sure that it's the best image possible to show somebody. And at the end of the day, you know, it's the little things that make it worthwhile you know.
Yep, and we really enjoy being able to see your photos. It's like I said, it's art. It's
and I
not
enjoy doing them. I enjoy doing them.
A skill, but it's an art that you're doing there, and we definitely appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I think we're winding down here. I'm not seeing really anybody else asking any more questions, and it looks like everyone's kind of enjoyed it. They've kind of learned some new things from us. We appreciate all your insights, Mo. And we look forward to kind of like seeing everybody next month. And I'm not sure what that'll look like, but Lou will give us more detail. And hopefully we'll see everybody at the OCA.
Yeah, and again, I enjoy talking about this as much as I do taking the pictures. And I'm always open to having conversations. So if anybody has any questions that they think about, you know, just email me and I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Well, all right, everybody, this is it. And if you missed some of it, this is going to be on YouTube and on Facebook to be rewatched if you want to see it again. And I hope you guys have a great evening. Take care.
Bye-bye, everybody.